Hey yo, we are finally back with more Yandere simulator content. And of course, today's victim is the most highly anticipated rival, Oka Ruto. Yes, I know, it took me long enough, but I'm finally ready to showcase my ideas. But a quick reminder for new viewers, this is an ongoing series where I reconstruct Yandere Simulator into my own original story. All of the characters that I have redesigned have essentially become my OCs. With that in mind, there's a lot of context you'll be missing, so I highly recommend checking out my playlist, which is linked below. Otherwise, I don't want to linger too much on the intro since there's a lot to unpack in Oka's video. So, let's hop right into it. For this video, I wanted to change the format a bit and dive straight into the redesign. Along with that, I will now reveal Oka's new name. Finally, I can introduce Fujino Junko. Quick explanation, Junko is her first name, and I mostly picked it just because it seemed fitting for her. As for her last name Fujino, it's a nod to Tatsuki Fujimoto. That aside, when I use the name Oka, I want to make it clear that it's in reference to the original Yansen character. Understood? Great. Anyways, since this is a redesign video, I feel like it's necessary for me to go over my opinions on Oka's original design. And to be honest, I don't hate it because I was there during the game's prime, and I do hold some biases due to nostalgia. But when I started to look into Oka's design more critically, I did notice a lot more flaws. And while I don't hate Oka's design, I did want to go for a different approach. I already know I'm going to get some backlash for this, but I decided to remove her alternative aesthetic. However, Junko still will have some alternative themes in her story. I am also aware that people are pretty attached to her messy hair, but in the end I decided to settle on option 1, and I also went as far as to changing it into a short bowl cut. The reason why I did this is quite simple. In Japanese culture, it's well known that conformity is enforced to a toxic degree. This is important for Junko's characterization, because Junko is a person that doesn't want to abide by society's rules. In other words, Junko's plain design is symbolic of her inability to express herself outwardly. As for the reason why the bowl cut is so short, I did this because I wanted Junko to be a tomboy. This was a result of my direct inspiration, Atarashi Gakko. I'm sure it was obvious, but in case some of you couldn't tell, Junko's face card obviously came from Suzuka. And quickly, I want to clarify that I'm not making Junko a tomboy because I think Suzuka is a tomboy. The actual reason for this is because Junko wants to stray away from what Japan perceives as feminine, much like the group Atarashi Gakko. It's another big reason for why I didn't want to pursue the gloomy goth route. Her inspirations aside, I did give her some acne and I also made her tall and lanky. The acne portion was mostly because I was self-inserting again, since I myself suffer from really bad genetic acne, and for her being tall and lanky, I just wanted her to stand out from the other rivals. It also feeds into the nerdy vibe I want for her. Also, I'm sure people are going to be upset with me making Junko a tomboy, and that's because another rival is meant to embody that trope. But I'm just gonna let you guys know in advance that I'm gonna do something a bit different. But with Junko's design finished, let's get into her rewrite portion. Growing up, Junko could never fit in with any of the girls that were her age, so instead, she mostly hung out with guys. Though she wasn't good at sports, she had no problem with playing rough and getting a little dirty. And with Kanashima being a small town, Junko's parents owned one of the only available convenience stores, which solidified Junko's popularity with the other boys. But Junko was never popular just because she brought free stuff. A lot of her friends actually admired her for her personality. Though not in a pick-me sense, Junko was definitely not like the other girls. She was unique, to put it simply. But one of Junko's favorite memories was playing Space Wars with her friends, and going to the cinema for the first time to watch Godzilla, which should be noted is her all-time favorite movie. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end. As Junko grows up, so do her friends. A lot of them become more distant, leaving Junko all alone. At first, Junko was puzzled by this. Why would her closest friends abandon her all of a sudden? In need of some advice, she seeks out her older sister. Though the two are polar opposites and they hardly get along, Junko is still self-aware enough to know when she needs help. As for Junko's sister's response, she does not sugarcoat the reality. This is where Junko learns about the rules of society, and she realizes that the reason why her friends abandoned her was simply because she's a girl. To expand on this, everyone around Junko is growing up, and they're learning to conform to society's expectations. And other than Junko not being able to adapt and change like her friends, she isn't conventionally attractive. This causes Junko to become frustrated. These were supposed to be her best friends, but instead of focusing on their connection, they abandon Junko because they see her as part of the past. They see her as someone who doesn't want to conform, so why would they want to be associated with that? And even at home, Junko can't escape these rules of society. Her parents, although well-meaning, are trying to get Junko to abide by the rules. It's not any easier with her sister being the example. This does cause Junko to get into a lot of arguments with her parents. And more often than not, despite them not being extremely religious, her parents suddenly start attending the temple more regularly. It gets to a point where they pray for Junko to either get her act together or to become irresistibly beautiful to attract a husband. The isolation from her peers and the excessive criticisms from her parents causes Junko to feel more ostracized. But instead of choosing to conform just to have an easier life, Junko does the opposite. This leads into the core of Junko's character, which is her integrity. You're all aware that all of my Yandere Redesign OCs feed into themes of feminism. Of course, Junko will still retain these themes, but a bigger theme she holds is to criticize a specific aspect of Japanese culture, which is the limitation of self-expression. And this is especially prevalent in this specific time in Japan. And in a way, this is an expansion of Rina's story when it comes to criticizing societal norms. However, this will not tie into the game story, because this is more specific to Junko's character profile. So with Junko now rewritten, let's transition to her implementation game-wise. Before I go over Junko's involvement in the main story, I want to first talk about what I'm going to do with the Occult Club. I'm well aware of the controversy surrounding the Occult Club, and it's been on high demand for me to either completely remove the Occult Club or change it to be more accurate. In the end, I did decide to keep the Occult Club, but I made the executive decision to make it focus on researching UFOs. Now before you guys freak out, let me walk you through my explanations. First, let's backpedal a bit and learn what the occult is meant to represent. By definition, the occult focuses on a range of supernatural beliefs, and from my research, aliens do somewhat count as part of the occult. But here's the other thing. Junko is actually an atheist. Crazy bombshell, I know, but let me explain myself once again. Based on Junko's experiences with religion, it's been anything but positive. I also like to imagine that Junko is a person that has a seeing is believing type of mindset. I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with this direction, especially since Japan is most famous for their religious culture, but in my personal opinion, I think this feeds into Junko's theme of not following societal norms. Getting back on the topic of how I'm handling the occult club, it does appear that Japanese schools do allow these clubs to exist. But from what I've seen, these clubs aren't officially recognized and they are made by students. And considering that my story takes place in the 1960s, it would make sense for Junko to start her own club. And real quickly, I should establish that Junko is a nerd. The reason why she chooses to make a club that focuses on researching UFOs is because she's a huge sci-fi fan. I mean, her favorite movie is literally Godzilla after all. But another thing is that Junko is ultimately using this club as a chance to make friends, because she is a senior this year, and at this point in the story, her graduation is just around the corner. And naturally, this leads to the next question. Where would Junko be able to host this club? My answer is the school library. For Kanashima High School, the school library is understaffed and underfunded. The only librarian there is heavily disliked due to her being seen as cold. But this isn't just because she's overworked, but because she is Okinawan. And if some of you didn't already know, Japan has some dodgy history when it comes to native Japanese people. I'm not going to be adding more to this just yet, but I want to make it clear that the librarian is a teaser for a certain character. But getting back to the point, Junko likes to spend a lot of her time in the library. During the time she spends, she ends up helping out the librarian a lot. The reason why Junko does this is out of the kindness of her own heart, especially due to the library becoming her safe space from her peers. Junko will also be able to empathize with the librarian because they are both perceived as different. So basically, the librarian becomes a guardian figure for Junko, and it's through the librarian's encouragement that Junko is able to have the courage to make the occult club. And even when Junko goes through her hardest times, the librarian is always there to cheer her up, and she encourages Junko to remain as her optimistic self. and Junko is quick to seek out her opportunity. Before I wrap up the segment, I do want to go over Junko's flower reveal, and also an issue I have with this flower concept. To sum things up, I realized I was focusing way too much time on researching the flowers. This was because I wanted to match the symbolism behind these flowers one-to-one with each rival's theme. Now, in concept, there is nothing wrong with this, but for an overthinker such as myself, I don't think this is very ideal. Not to mention that this project is supposed to be just for fun, so I decided to take the liberty of making things easier for myself by choosing these flowers based on vibes. I also feel like it's better for you guys to come up with your own conclusions and theories on why you think a flower I chose may tie in with a rival story. But anyways, for Junko, I decided to settle on a blue iris. The reason why I chose a blue iris specifically was because 1. Blue matches the original Oka's color scheme, and another reason was because I found out that blue irises were meant to be spiritual in a sense, and I thought it would be ironic considering that Junko is, well, an atheist. For the most part, I did mostly choose this based on aesthetics, but it's fine because again, this is meant to be for fun. But moving on, let's finally get into the actual main storyline. Real quick, I want to acknowledge some criticism that I have been receiving when it comes to Naoji and his relationship with the rivals. In a previous video, I did state how I wanted the relationship between Naoji and the rivals to go from weak to strong as the series progresses. However, that doesn't dismiss the fact that the relationship between them barely feels present. So in turn, I will be mending this issue with Junko's story. Which leads us to the elephant in the room. Let's finally address the animatic now, shall we? So in that short intro, you can see that Naoji is looking into the recent tragedies. Obviously, this little cinematic scene is meant to jumpstart Junko's story, but I want to add that some parts of this animatic can change depending on what route you're taking. So as you can see, Naoji is looking into the deaths of the girls because this applies to the Massacre route. But in the Pacifist route, the book will change, and instead Naoji is looking into stages of cancer. So after Junko is revealed, Naoji will confront her for stalking him. However, instead of Junko feeling ashamed, she would take the opportunity to introduce herself and plug in her occult club. Naoji, although baffled, understands that Junko didn't really have bad intentions. But it doesn't negate the fact that it makes him uncomfortable, so he scolds her for this. Junko acknowledges this and does apologize, however, she is more focused on advertising her club to him. Either way, Naoji does politely decline Junko's offer, but Junko is pretty persistent, and also pretty desperate. So she gets down and begs on her knees for Naoji to join her club, and she even offers to accommodate his busy schedule. Since Naoji is a people pleaser, he reluctantly agrees to join Junko's club. This allows an ecstatic Junko to explain the premise of said club. Admittedly, Naoji is baffled by the idea of researching aliens, but he still is an open-minded person, so he is willing to give Junko a fair shot. And to his surprise, as time progresses, he realizes that the club isn't as strange as he thought it would be, and during this time, he begins to form a tighter bond with Junko. And for Naoji and Junko's relationship, I decided to reference my all-time favorite game, Silent Hill F. So for their friendship, I wanted it to be a reference between Hinako and Shu, but in the sense where the two are partners with each other. And with the occult club being focused on researching aliens, Junko and Naoji would become detective partners. A little side note, but Naoji still doesn't believe in the existence of aliens, he just enjoys Junko's company. And if you remember from last video, I did bring up that despite both Ichika and Hinako being the main protagonists of their story, the two don't really hold any similarities with each other, but Junko in many ways is a better reflection of Hinako. And going back to how Junko and Naoji are partners, this would act as Ichika's main motivation to drive them both apart. But anyways, after Ichika joins the club, Junko welcomes her with open arms. She will continue to give the player a tape recorder. This tape recorder is essential for you to document your research. Gameplay-wise, there would be a goofy sequence where you would interview people who have supposedly had encounters with UFOs. There are NPCs that are going to be lying to you, so it is important that you make sure they are telling the truth, because the next day, Junko is going to judge your performance. And if you bring too many fake witnesses, then she is going to let you go from the club, because she is going to assume that you aren't taking her seriously. Meaning you get a game over and you do have to try again. But the gameplay aside, this is where things get serious story-wise. Throughout the week, things will carry out as normal. And I would want the player to assume that the story for Junko is going to be similar to the previous rivals, where both Ichika and Junko would eventually have some sort of connection together, have a talk, and then Ichika would move on. But as the week is about to come to an end, you'll notice that lately, Naoshi hasn't been showing up. Ichika would not be aware of this, but Junko and Naoshi actually have gotten into a fight. And this is about Naoshi's mother. Finally, let me discuss a plotline that has not been important up until now. Like I have briefly mentioned many times before, Naoji's mother is ill, and her illness is actually cancer. At the moment, I still haven't figured out what type of cancer she would have, but just know that by the time that she's been checked out, it was already too late for her to treat it. And like I've also stated before, she is currently bedridden, but soon she will be admitted into a hospital. And at the current rate things are going, it seems like she's not going to make it. If you guys remember from a previous video, I also mentioned that Naoji likes to distract himself. He's also uncomfortable with discussing her declining health. Even though Naoji is a forward-thinking guy and he's very progressive for his time, he still holds some values of toxic masculinity. And one of the toxic values that he holds is to never show your weakness as a man, which obviously isn't a healthy mindset and could lead him down a self-destructive path. I know some people may be curious as to why I didn't bring up this plot point until now, and the reason why this is because I wanted you guys to be as in the dark as Ichika, because Naoji wants people to have a certain perception of him. And keep in mind that Naoji has a crush on Ichika, so he wouldn't want to shatter her perception of him. Regardless, Junko sees through his bullshit, and with her being a bit older than him, she is quick to put him in his place. Despite Junko's naive nature, she has enough common sense to clock that Naoji's mindset isn't healthy. This would cause Naoji's kind facade to finally crack. He becomes extremely defensive and reasons that Junko has no idea what she's talking about. She has no idea what it's like to go through the pressure he is under. And as his mind is clouded by anger, Naoji says something that he can't take back. Maybe that's why you don't belong. There's a moment of silence before Naoji catches himself. He wants to apologize and take back what he said, but he feels like it's too late. And it's been a few days, but the two haven't been talking for a while. But returning back to Junko and Ichika, Junko explains the whole situation to her. Even though Junko was hurt by what Naoji said, in her eyes, he is still her partner. And as his partner, she wants to stick by his side no matter what. And Junko also doesn't want to be like her ex-friends who left her. But on Ichika's end, she's shocked by this. She never thought that Naoji of all people would have hardships, because he was always there for other people, especially for her. And for once, through Junko out of all people, Ichika thinks about Naoji's feelings instead of her own. And this is actually going to be Junko's main lesson for Ichika, which is empathy. Because despite the fact that Ichika was extremely jealous of Junko being close friends with Naoji, she recognizes that Naoji is in pain, and she was too clouded by jealousy to ever recognize that. Ichika would have an epiphany. Eventually, she decides to agree and help Junko rekindle her friendship with Naoji. Maybe she doesn't like Junko, and she doesn't have to, but Naoji can't continue to fight this battle on his own. He needs a support system, and regardless of whether or not she is ready to admit it, she isn't the only person he needs in his life. Now, Junko and Ichika have to devise a plan, and it's simple. Ichika would use herself as bait to invite Naoji for a hangout, but Junko would be the one to choose the location. Finally, Ichika manages to convince Naoji, but she doesn't tell him that Junko is involved. And Naoji does become a bit suspicious of the location since it seems a bit further from the town, but he does trust Ichika. As the two walk together, you will discover a new location, which is actually Junko's special area. This is the abandoned cinema where Junko watched her favorite movie for the first time, and coincidentally, while waiting for Naoji and Ichika to arrive, she brings along a movie projector from her family store just to kill some time. Ichika continues to instruct Naoji to take a seat with Junko before excusing herself. Now they are both alone, and it's a bit awkward, but they can't sit in silence forever. Eventually, Naoji speaks first. He apologizes for what he said, and he admits that it's been eating at him for a while. There's a pause before Junko accepts his apology, but she also addresses her concern for him, because she knows that Naoji is going through a tough situation, and she isn't trying to act like she understands what he's going through, but she wants to be there for him as his friend, and it isn't fair for him to shut her out. Naoji doesn't want to admit it, but he knows Junko is right. It's still not going to take one night to overcome his mindset, especially since his mom is still going to pass soon. But he isn't unreasonable, and in the end, he doesn't want to lose his partner because of his frustrations. Eventually, the two finally do make up, but there still are issues that they have to work out together, but that's normal for most friendships. But meanwhile, for Ichika, she is watching this conversation in the distance, and it reminds her of a question she asked herself when she was speaking with Rina. Does she love Naoji for who he is, or does she love him to fulfill a status quo? Seeing that Ichika allows Naoji and Junko to have a bitter but tender moment together, I think it's clear what that answer is. And later on, as a few weeks pass, Junko will give Ichika her special item. This will be the very tape recorder that all three of you have used to log your alien entries. You can use this to look back on your previous entries, but when you reach the end, you will find that Junko has left a message for Ichika. It's a small token of gratitude for what she has done for her friendship with Naoji, and in the future she will wish Ichika well for her next year of high school. Even though the two weren't really that close, Junko will heavily impact Ichika in the pacifist route. And moving forward, Ichika will have a big change. From now on, she will try to be less possessive when it comes to Naoji, and she will try to better herself for his sake. It'll be hard, but for him, she's willing to try. As always, I will have to place a content warning here. If you are sensitive to mentions of violence or death, then I highly recommend that you click off this video. For this route, things are going to be a bit different here. Resuming from the original animatic, Naoji is looking into the deaths of the recent tragedies. He will still confront Junko for stalking him, but this time, the focus will not be on her advertising her club. Instead, Junko is stalking Naoji because she believes that he is the killer, because he has been associated with every rival. And she believes that Ichika is the next target, because remember that the killer is targeting only girls, so it would logically make sense that it would be Naoji. But these assumptions would quickly be shut down. He's able to clarify his intentions, and despite her earlier speculations, Junko reluctantly trusts him. But due to her naive nature, Junko is also willing to snuff out the killer and bring justice to their school, and more importantly, their town. With the two now joining forces, this will add a different meaning to them becoming detective partners. But remember that the school librarian is present, and to lay low they have to pretend that they are participating in the occult club as a cover-up. But like before, Ichika would intervene and insert herself into the situation. But Naoji isn't willing to risk Ichika's safety, so he would instruct Junko to mislead Ichika. And from this point, the gameplay will change. When you try to join Junko's club, she will make an excuse that you are too young to join the occult club. With this in mind, the gameplay is no longer focused on interviewing people for UFO investigations. Now your objective is to stalk both Naoji and Junko, and in this process, Ichika would find that they're trying to investigate who the killer is. And now the gameplay will be focused on sabotaging both Junko and Naoji from coming closer on investigating the killer's identity, which as we know, is you. At the moment, I haven't thought of a detailed system for how this would work, but like always, I will refine this in the future. And in-game you won't notice this, but someone is watching Ichika. Otherwise, the story would continue somewhat similar to the pacifist route, where both Junko and Naoji end up fighting, and this would again trace back to his mother's declining health. But for this storyline, Junko would conclude that Naoji is trying to play hero to distract himself from the eventual death of his mother. This is where Junko would cave and tell Ichika everything, including their investigation. And like before, she plans for you to bring Naoji to the abandoned cinema. However, Ichika does not intend on carrying out this plan. Due to her being more unstable in this route, she views Junko as a threat, not only because of their close partnership, but also because Junko is actively assisting Naoji in trying to find the killer, which is her. Here, we should note that the previous acts that Ichika has committed were mostly due to impulse, but this time she has to be more careful and calculated. And Ichika isn't a dummy. She will look into the place that Junko wants to meet up at in the map. Seeing that it is a little further away from town, she sees this as a perfect opportunity. Nobody but Ichika's parents would be aware of her leaving so late. But the great thing about Ichika's parents is that they are the type of parents that will defend their daughter to the very end, because again, she is extremely well behaved, and they have every reason to believe that their precious daughter is innocent. All Ichika has to do is bring a weapon and show up. When Ichika arrives, she finds Junko. Like in the previous route, she is still watching Godzilla. The loud noises will drown out Ichika's approach. But just as Ichika sneaks up on Junko, her shadow is casted onto the projector. Junko turns around and evades Ichika's attack. As Junko tumbles, she quickly processes who was about to stab her, and she is shocked to find Ichika. At first, she tries to reason with her, suspecting that this is probably a joke, but instead, Ichika chases her, because now that Junko has seen her face, she has no other choice but to commit. In this scenario, Junko can't exactly scream for help, because even if someone was nearby, the loud noises of the movie practically drowns out her screams. Taking out her tape recorder, Junko tries to get some evidence, and Ichika is now even more determined to capture Junko. And let's not forget that Junko isn't exactly the most athletic type. She spent the majority of her time indoors after all, and realistically she would not want to fight with someone who is armed. But maybe, or hopefully, she could use the terrain of the movie theater to her advantage. But unfortunately, she clumsily slips and trips down the stairs. Ichika is there, and she does what she has to do. After a while, Junko's struggling stops. The last thing she can see through her glasses is Ichika taking the tape recorder from her hands. Now all she has to do is get rid of the body, get rid of the evidence, clean up, change her clothes, and go back home before curfew. A few days pass from the incident and Junko is reported missing. Like most of the other girls, her case goes dismissed. And though her family is worried for her, they don't make a scene about this case, because the last thing they want to do is cause trouble. Otherwise, the majority of the townspeople in Kaneshima don't seem to care for Junko's missing case, because they just assume that she must have ran away. It would only make sense. As for Ichika, she feels accomplished, and she will continue to act as normal. As for Naoji, he becomes depressed by the situation. Something about it just didn't feel right. Maybe it was because he didn't get the chance to apologize to Junko, or maybe it's because he didn't believe that she ran away. He doesn't have any concrete evidence, nor does he have a lead, but he has a hunch that the killer is closer than he initially thought. And if the police are going to continue to be stagnant on this case, then maybe he'll take matters into his own hands. And fortunately, Naoji would gain an unexpected ally that was close to Junko.